I'd like to introduce Steve Evans. I've heard him talk before, so rather than give the standard introduction, I think he can introduce himself much better and much more forcefully than I can. So we'll pass you straight over to Steve, who will be prepared to answer questions either as we go along or at the end. So many thanks.
Thanks, Terry.
Thanks for talking to us, Steve.
Hello. So, my goodness me, do I come with a reputation? I've got no one on the front row at all. At school, I had my own imaginary friend. Now his entire family are here. She's super. I've got people that far back, you've probably got your watches set to a different time zone than I have. Although, let's face it, we are in Wolverhampton, which is universally described as 1937. It is a long way back, isn't it? I come from Wolverhampton. I don't know what you're expecting, to be perfectly honest. I don't know if any of you are coming here because you've heard I gave a talk before, or if you've been made to come here, or if it's... I've got one there thinking, that's peer pressure, right? Thinking, well... Oh, you're the person who made them? Oh, right. Well, I knew there was something going on there. She was thinking, oh, I daresn't look up. But I saw you, so it didn't make any difference. I think Mr. Happy needs explaining as well. Because I didn't create this. I didn't create my condition. And, well, I did create my condition. Obviously, I grew my tumour. But my way of dealing with it is to be like this. This is how I am now. Am I in denial? Am I pretending? Probably. But I'm doing a good job because I don't cry before I go to bed anymore. So that's a good thing for me. And the analogy, I suppose, and there'll be a few analogies during this, is that, can you imagine, I mean, based on what happened in America last week, this is perhaps not a suitable analogy, but it is the one that I carry. So with respect to that awful event in America, I would make an analogy that relates to a gun. And you imagine somebody pointing a gun at your head. Initially, that feeling must be terrifying. You just imagine it. Just the two of you. There's no one else there. And there's a man with a gun. You don't know the man with the gun. You know it's a gun. And he's pointing it at your head. It would be utterly terrifying. But nothing happens. So, after 5 minutes, the man's not talking to you, he's just pointing the gun at you. Well, there has to be a point where you need the toilet for a start off. You know, you got food to eat, there's television to watch, because the Sky Plus will be on, won't it? You know, so what do? You basically say, look, mate, if you're going to carry on pointing it, we're going over there. And that is the analogy. I am constantly terrified because I'm 51. And I quite like the idea of the average age that I was going to live to being 83. I quite like that. That was my plan. I was at Big Chill Festival. And although it's not my sort of music, Kanye West was a very big disappointment, may I say. He threw a strop due to me upsetting him in some way. So he went without having his food. So the following day, we ate his chicken. Now, you know, I'm not saying that's as close as showbiz as I get, but it probably is. So I was walking after I finished my work to see his concert. And I got out of breath. And I thought, well, this is not right. And so it began. I didn't understand the importance of being out of breath. I didn't understand the relevance of being anemic as a man. I mean, the blood's got to be going somewhere. Or perhaps the blood isn't producing red blood cells. And we also all know one of the things that stops red blood cells being produced, and that's, of course, cancer. But I'm not going to have that. So we're fine. Because I go to my doctors and I say, well, I'm out of breath. And he said, that'll be unfit and 50. Is that the time? Thanks very much. I said, well, blood test? He said, well, if you want. So I had a blood test and then got a call to say I was anemic. And I was really pleased with that because anemia, well, you have iron tablets for that, according to my wife, who knows all. So there wasn't a problem. I then saw him and he'd got some results and he phoned here to speak to someone called Sarah, who's a specialist nurse who carries out endoscopy procedures. And I came in on a Friday to be told by her that the doctor said, of course he knows what he's talking about, obviously, being a doctor. I mean, you've got stethoscope and everything. Well, you can't just buy them. Well, no, you can, can't you? they're not even that expensive. About 12 quid on that. Perhaps that'll complete the look. So, he said, it'll be an ulcer. So I came and saw Sarah. She went, yeah, that'll be an ulcer. Until she carried out the endoscopy procedure. Whilst the camera was in there. I don't know if any of you have had an endoscopy. Always advise people to have as much sedative as possible without actually suffering brain damage. Because you've got a tube down your throat and you've got things that are designed to stop that happening. I believe it's called a gag reflex. So once she was in, bless her, expert, wonderful person, needed to have a look round. How do you do that? Clear the food out of the way. What do you use? Air. I could feel it coming out. It was like this. I was thinking, this is not, it's like something out of Alien. It was terrible. And then, after about 2.5 hours, she said it was 4 minutes, but to be perfectly honest, she said to her colleague, incredibly professional, perfect use of language. The person, I've never met her since. I met her once after this. But she said, biopsy. That's all she said, biopsy. She said lots of other things, I wasn't listening to that. She said biopsy, and I thought, oh, that don't sound good. I don't think you need a biopsy for an ulcer. I said, biopsy? She went, it's not a conversation for this room. I thought, oh dear. It's not what I'm expecting. And then we go over to the speech. So, she told me I've got a tumour. She said, in all probability, you've got a tumour. Obviously, I had to have a biopsy. But the woman's job was to look for tumours. I mean, if she didn't know what a tumour looks like, really, she shouldn't have been sticking that thing down my throat. You know, you've got to have trust. So what's it like to be told you have cancer? Well, you enter a state of emotional shock. But in my case, something else happened that I only got to appreciate sometime later. At the very moment of being told, you find out the type of person that deep down you really are. What and who is important to you and what you really value. Do you think about yourself or do you think about others? I was calm. My wife Septina was in the waiting area whilst I was told, this being my choice. So I went and got her, sat her down. I said nothing, but simply handed her a handkerchief, and Sarah spoke. I didn't start crying until I realised we then had to go home and break the news to our daughter Lauren, and I simply didn't know how to. And then there was our other daughter Megan away on holiday. Did she need to know there and then, or could it wait? So working out how to break the news to people and then helping them through their upset became our focus in the immediate days after diagnosis. Because in so many cases, the people who really suffer are those around you. My pain came primarily from knowing the upset I was causing them. So, that's that answers that question, doesn't it? And I've don't mean to take the mood down, but I've taken my own mood down. Of course, I was there when that happened, and I can't really be Mr. Song and Dance remembering that. It was appalling. So, where's the positive? Let me tell you something. At that moment, if you are ever party to someone being told that they've got cancer, please remember something else. Obviously, they're going to be devastated. Well, what happens is you go into shock. I said that. The family have no concept of what to do. They don't know what to do because they've got no control. Terrible for the family. Terrible for the family. The person that's got it, they've got a lot more control. But something happens. Not to everyone, it happened to me. And that was the thing that I spoke about. you sort of find out the person that you really are. I mean, who knew? I found that, and I can tell you this, it's a boast really, that I just got incredible strength from thinking about other people. All of my family, the children, you know, my mother-in-law, my sister, and how I was going to tell them. So all we were doing was almost putting in a plan that was relevant to everyone else. It was me, was just like secondary. I didn't think about me, I just thought about everyone else, and I wasn't expecting that. I wasn't expecting that at all. The analogy is a simple one. It's quite, this is where I try and lighten the mood again now. And this will happen as this, you know, it will have a frequency to it, this talk, I think. But if you can imagine the condition, so I've been told that I'm poorly and I'm going to have another CT scan. No, I'm going to have a CT scan for the first time. And then I'm going to have a second meeting with Sarah. We'll deal with the second meeting with Sarah in a minute. But the overarching analogy is quite a simple one, if you're able to do it. And it's this: you imagine the condition to be a sack. It's an horrible sack. It's not a nice sack. You can't grasp it. You know, you can't, you know, one of those things without handles. And inside there's lots of weights. So you can't move it. You just can't move it. You know, you can't do anything with it. You've got to carry it with you all the time. So you just stay where you are and don't do anything, really. You just wait for the inevitable to happen. We haven't come to that bit yet. But all I've done, and I wasn't consciously aware of doing this, was I've just taken the weights out and just shared them round. So all of my family and friends have got one of the weights. All carry them in their pockets all the time. Some days they know they've got one, some days it's heavier than others. But they go about their lives, and I've just got an empty sack. You know? And it really is meant to sound that light. Because I'll take you back to the analogy of the gun. We know the gun's there. And does it change your personality? I don't know. But this was roughly what I was like before. So now this is the version of me poorly. So you're told you've got cancer, which is not a good day. But you have a CT scan and you then go for the results of the CT scan, and you're told that they've got bad news. And to be perfectly honest, I was more minded of the fact that Sarah had got her use of tenses wrong, because she'd already given me the bad news. So no, I said, no, you already give me the bad news. No, we've got more bad news. And the more bad news was that I had T4 stomach cancer, which for the wider audience is the stage of a tumour development where it has attached itself to a second organ. It is transcended and migrated, I believe the medical term is so it's done that. And the only treatment that I can have was palliative. So they were never going to cure me, but they were going to look after me best they could, and they wouldn't tell me how long I'd got. She said that in 4 days' time you've got to meet your lead consultant, and this is where the story changes completely. Because 4 days later, it was very dark 4 days, because we had only been given bad news to this point, so we basically thought the worst, you know, that I wasn't going to be here last Christmas. But of course I was, you know, and we had 4 days. We spent it together, the four of us. Megan was back off holiday by this point. And then on the Monday, we went to see, or to Tuesday I think, we went to see my lead consultant, who is the man referred to as Professor Ferry. And when they told me his name was Ferry, I really hoped his first name was Brian. I was gutted when I found out it was David. And I went in, and you can imagine, we've never met before. I'm an oncology patient. I know I don't look like one, but I can help you with that. I don't look like a man who's going to be given news that he has only got a period on this lovely earth. Not the period that he expected. I don't look like that. I don't look like someone who has been given shattering news. I don't look like someone who is so severely disabled they won't have to have their DLA recalculated by the government. That's me. No, I don't look like that, but I can help you if appearances are important, because a friend's mom did knit me this. There we are. So I've now got my crocheted blanket, so I now look like I'm supposed to. Doesn't fit in with a suit though, does it? But that is what happened. That is what happened, yes. As the news broke amongst my friendship circle that I was very poorly, someone's mom knitted me a crocheted blanket, which I keep with me always, sort of. So, when you go in, the prof was expecting, I don't know. But my first question was, how long have I got? He said a year, and we all just, I said, well, I'll settle for that. We all smiled, and he just smiled back. And you could see he was thinking, I've got to write one here. This is going to be fun. The prof and I's relationship has become very close. We understand each other very well. And he is the only reason I'm standing here. And I'll explain that. That will be the, as I go on in the second who have got cancer have their own journeys. You support and facilitate that journey. You are vital. If any of you in your heads, under any circumstances, would attribute the word just to your post, I would suggest you rethink your career options. Because there is no one in my chain that is not vital. And the last thing the professor said, we've got a trial. It's marvellous. We'll put you on this trial. It's called Real 3. We're going to, there is an antibody called Pantiumumab, and it's brilliant. And what it does, it attaches itself to the growth receptors on cancer cells, and it slows down the growth rate, and it will extend life in life-limited people such as yourselves by something in the region of 3 months. And I said, where do I sign? Wonderful. And you get all of this extra stuff. Marvellous. Then you have chemotherapy. And we come on to extract number 2 from my speech. What's it like to have chemotherapy? What's it like to receive chemotherapy? Horrible and scary. Nothing to do with the drugs or the comedy that is multiple attempts to fit a cannula. The pins and needles, throat spasms, all wee the colour of iron brew. I text my mate John. I said, my wee's the colour of iron brew. He replied, does it taste like it? I've still got the text. No, it's because in day case, there is no hiding from your condition. That's what's scary. But the staff we encountered at Russell's Hall were amazing. They knew I was scared. Of course they did. But then everything seemed to be so normal. So it sort of took your mind off it, really. And that was a point that I encountered today. That it's the normality of things that take away your own fears. Because you're not in a different place. You know, you're not in a special place. You're in a normal place. And it makes you feel normal. And that's very important. So I had chemotherapy. But the side effect they didn't tell me about was a gastrointestinal bleed. What a fabulous creation that is. Where you basically internally bleed. And I didn't know anything about that. So I was poorly. I couldn't get off the bed. And it was obviously a reaction to the chemotherapy. An ambulance was called and I was brought in here to A&E. To A&E. And they are experts in what they are and what they do. And several doctors looked at me and they took my bloods, and my blood seemed stable to them. And they concluded that the best option was to go home. Because I wasn't bleeding, that they could see. That the blood that was coming away wasn't melena, which I didn't know about at that time, was in fact an irritation to the bowel caused by the chemotherapy. So they sent me home. Now I'm not going to be overly dramatic, but they sent me home. Now I then started vomiting blood. Now, being a bloke and being in charge, as blokes always are, what I say goes in our house. Now, I think a few of you know me well enough by now to know that there is a sting in this tale, and certainly what goes in our house isn't decided by me. Just as well. All I wanted to do was go to sleep, because all my organs were failing. I didn't know that. My blood was just going. It was just going. My blood count was through the floor when I actually finally got to Russell's Hall. But I wasn't going to Russell's Hall. I was staying in bed, because I'm the bloke. And this is what happens. Little woman syndrome. Very offensive. Wife says, you're going to hospital. Husband says, I'm not, I'm staying here. Then the wife says, well, all right, but in the morning, regardless of what you say, if you're still bad, I'm phoning the ambulance. Does that sound familiar? Doesn't it? In the morning, as clinical experts and people with experience, what would I have been? Dead. How scary is that? Sorry. My wife was having none of it. I put the pillow over my head and started to cry like a 9-year-old who'd had toys removed. And I lifted the pillow after crying loudly for a couple of minutes, and I said to her, oh, you're still here? She said, yes, I've also found the ambulance. I've just put in the kettle on. And off she went downstairs, completely ignored me. The ambulance came, and I'm still here, purely because of my wife. So she saved my life, and I bought her a car. What can I say? Well, you do, don't you? Really. I bought her a car. I bought her an Audi A3. Absolutely fantastic. She doesn't get on with it very well, and this is the reason. It's even the colour she wanted, right? The reason she doesn't get on with it very well, the reverse is on the wrong side. So if anyone from Audi is watching, all I'm saying is, you know, you're spoiling the shit for an ape of the tar, mate. That's all I'm saying. So we went to hospital, which was Russell's Hall, because that's my treatment centre. And the doctor said, he's a young lad, about 9. And he said, you're bleeding, mate, and not in a good way. Which I thought, oh, where's my pen? That happens a few times in this. Where's my pen? And I said, well, you're going to mend me, aren't you? And he went, yeah, well, let's have a go at that then. Yeah, oh, right. Oh, dear, that wasn't very good. So then I said to my wife, I might not get through this. And she went, oh, dear, wasn't expecting that. So extract 3. What is it like lying on a bed in a cubicle, holding your wife's hand, knowing you are possibly going to die? This isn't as dark. This bit's all right. In short, horrible and scary. You may notice a pattern forming here. But what happened that day was something very important. We agreed if we got through it, everything had to change. And rather than trying to keep the life we had had, we would have a new life, only where only important things mattered. Time with each other, the girls, and our family and friends. It's also important to note that whilst in hospital, Sep had contacted my employer, who, to protect my family financially, had retired me on ill health grounds with a full pension. So we had no money worries, and I would now have the time to fulfil the promise we had made to one another. So that's what happened. It's a very good thing. It was lovely, to be honest. We'd been married at that point 26 years. And I think it's fair to say, without being inappropriate, that was probably one of the closest moments that we'd ever had together. And we've had 2 children. I'm a man who, at the age of 16, met a woman called Septina, and I'm now 51. That's it. You know, I don't know how complex your private lives are. That's as complex as mine is. That's it. 1985, I got married. I was told we were having children, and apparently I was very happy with that. She still tells the story of me coming here, listening to a boxing match from a guy called Dave Boy Macaulay, and asking for the fetal heart monitor to be turned off because it was affecting the signal to me Walkman. I was young. So the prof came to the bed, and he wanted to thank Septina for keeping me alive, really. And she was She was outside having a fag. Let's be realistic about this. I've told this story many times. She was outside having a fag. So he told me, you know, what had happened. Well, actually, he waited 20 minutes for me to wake up because he thought he was going to lose me. And he wanted to, you know, make sure I was all right. And he left and the curtain was drawn. You know that curtain you have in hospitals that is an acoustic barrier? Do you know that one? Where when you're the other side, you can say anything at all, and people the other side, they can't hear you, you know, that special one. Well, there was 2 nurses in Russell's Hall, and they were the other side of the special acoustic curtain, and the one said to the other, "The professor was with that bloke for ages. Who is he?" And the mate went, "I don't know." She said, "Is he famous?" And her mate says, "I don't think so. He comes from Wolverhampton." So I've got this. This is me in bed. And we went home. Oh, this is a good one. This one scares me, and I wrote it. So we went home. We were fine. So we had a retirement party at the Civic Halls in Wolverhampton, and 400 people came. Oh, 400 people. I've got pictures. I've got pictures on my phone. If it didn't hurt, I'd have tattoos. All I'm saying is, you don't have that. You don't have that and make sure people can't have access to it. 400 people came. And they had to put the speeches back because the mayor was late. Indeed, yeah. Yeah. The leader of the council was there, the deputy leader of the council, and obviously I thought they'd gone to someone else's party. Now, I thought I was at someone else's party. But on that morning, I'd started to bleed again. So I did look rather poorly on the photos, it must be said. So we, after the party, we went to Russell's Hall Hospital, and then something happened. So I want to read another extract from my speech that I did for the professor, picking up from the first bleed. So we went home, recovered. I had my next session of chemo on November, and on November the 22nd, I had a retirement party from the council, and 400 people came. No one expected that. But then no one expected me to bleed again either. But unfortunately, that is what happened on the morning of the gig, causing me to look rather poorly on the photos. Just mention that. This time we went straight to Russell's Hall, having phoned ahead to my treatment ward so they knew I was coming. We arrived at 6 p.m. However, records will show that it took 11 hours to get through A&E and then EAU to a bed that was all ready for us before we actually arrived at the hospital. This is all about the patient's experience. And it was very difficult to deal with. Please don't think that I'm being critical. All I'm saying is, I was all right with it, sort of. My wife was distraught because I'd got a sample of melena in my bag. And I was probably bleeding to death. But really, the computer system was down, so I needed to go. Could you go back outside? Now, please don't take that wrong. The people that were there, I'm sure, were at the very highest level as professionals. But please just bear that in mind. When we come to the end of this, which is in a couple of minutes, we're going to look at the just principle again and what happened this week. Everyone involved in oncology is incredibly important. That lady at the reception of A&E, she didn't know she was involved in oncology, but she was. So there is no matter of degrees. Your jobs must be very difficult, because if you have a bad day, I could die. And that's a lot of stress. That's a lot of stress for you. I have no stress, I'm fine. But you know, I don't want to be too serious. So I'm not going to read the bit that says, what's it like waiting 11 hours knowing that once again you might be bleeding to death. I think that's just going to bring it down. But there is a bit. And it ends well. Because I went on to C4. And I was looked after great. So we got through the next chemo session, and then we got to New Year's Eve 2011, and I bled again. And we went in, but we're experts now. So we know how, even outside of normal hours, to re-triage ourselves. You phone C4, you tell them to tell EAU that you're coming, so you don't have to bother with A&E, so you get that out of the way, and you get an ambulance to take you in, so you haven't got to bother sitting, you're already lying, so you've got all that sorted. It's easy. You're in there, and the bloke with the endoscopy, he was put on standby. They were all a little bit hands off. They were all a bit, yes, well, we're fine and we know what we're doing. And as a patient, you have to be the best patient you can be to help those that are helping you. So you are a little bit gentle. But I did know, because I could feel it moving. Let us not be too industrial here. But I did know what was coming. And when the industrial quantity of Melina was produced, and my male nurse had to go out for some fresh air, the bloke with the endoscopy was here within the hour. And he was fine. And he said, there's nothing there, mate. He said, your bleeding's already stopped. And then he said this, which is brilliant, and it tells you everything about the need to normalise the contract that we have between us. And he said this. He said, I couldn't see any bleeding, mate, but while I was in there, I know what the prof's like, so I took some lovely pictures of your tumour. Which, when the prof came to see me in the new year, because none of them work on bank holidays, he did say, hey, have a look at these. So I know what it looks like, which is disappointing. I thought it was going to have volcanoes and hair growing out of it and all sorts of things. It just looks like someone's gone along with a grey spray can and just gone, with that, right? And it's just grey, isn't it? That's all it is. Coming back to the professor. This was the genius of what has happened. After the first bleed, and I can't give you this as fact, but I think the general opinion was stop treatment, because we don't know what's causing the bleeding. But it's almost definitely the chemotherapy. So we stop the chemotherapy, we look for alternatives. Unfortunately, there probably aren't going to be any. And then palliatively, the journey ends at a point halfway through this year, just gone. Because I hadn't had chemotherapy. I'd only had one session. The prof went, nah, it's not the chemo. Just coincidence. Everyone went, oh, okay. So he said to me, nah, you'll be all right. So I had another bleed. And he went, you know, I'm still not sure. I still don't know that it's the chemo. You'll be fine, you'll be fine. So then, of course, the third session of chemo was clear. And then the fourth one, he put his hands up and he went, oh, to be perfectly honest, son, we're playing Russian roulette with your mortality here, so we've got to do something about it. I said, yeah, but it's all right, Prof, because you've seen this before, haven't you? And then he said something which was chilling. He said, no. And that's not good. When you're a patient, you don't want a professor of oncology not to have seen your condition before. That's not good on any level. And he'd also used the phrase Russian roulette, which I wasn't comfortable with either. I don't know if that's a term used in Narnia. I don't know. But, or if they've even got a Russia. So, what he said was this. We had to decide what to do. So we were CT scanned, and this was the miracle. Keeping faith and having the bleeds and having faith and just knowing that the bleeds wouldn't be terminal enabled the chemo to do its job. Now, regardless of what people will tell you publicly, ask people privately what a T4 tumour is. A tank, basically. And giving it chemotherapy is like throwing stones at it. It will distract the driver. But when you stop throwing the stones, he will run over you and your house and everyone else you've ever met. That's a T4 tumour. My index had gone down from 119 to 46. A T4 tumour that had shrunk that much. And I went into remission. So I've got T4 stomach cancer, and I haven't had any treatment since the 28th of December last year. And I've had the most wonderful of years. It's just been fabulous, doing all of the things that we said. Because remember, I worked for the council, and they gave me a shed load of cash. So, you know, what can you do? A few weeks ago, and I'm going to read from my notes now, if you don't mind, if you could just indulge me, because this is the end of my talk. I started to feel breathless, but I didn't realise at that time the simplicity of it. You basically breathless for a number of reasons. I'm not going to have any of those. I'm going to have one problem, and that is my blood count. So I did a talk similar to this for the prof, and I said to him, breathless, he said, "Oh, blood test." So the blood test showed a blood count of 7.1. So I'd been living, going on holiday in Spain, doing gigs as a magician, all sorts of stuff like that, with a blood count approximately 7.1, which, you know, I should have at least been wearing that blanket at 7.1. So they said, well, let's get your blood up. But there's only really, from a lay position, 2 reasons why you're going to have a blood count that low. Firstly, you're going to be bleeding. Well, I'm a bloke, so there's no blood show. Oh, yes, that's another thing as well. Before you enter the medical world, you know nothing of the Bristol stool chart. Now I can tell you what number it is purely by sound. Doesn't even have to be visually inspected, but last Christmas we invented number 8. After realising that large numbers of dry roasted peanuts aren't actually digested, we invented Pebble Dash. That's probably too much detail, to be candid. All I'm saying is you learn some stuff. It's because the tumour's gone active again. And it's testament, I think, to the professionals that work for me and with me that I've got that close to them that it's upset them. Now, I'm not saying that I'm now counselling them, because that gives you the wrong impression of me. I don't have those skills. But being strong is all about reason, really. And if you walk around being strong, that's not how it works. You know, if you're a weightlifter of immense strength, you don't walk around picking things up all the time. If you are given an inner strength, a friend of mine said that finding out that I had this condition had released a Superman within. That's not for me to say, but you could call it a superpower. If you ever look at a waiting room full of people with cancer, if you look in there with pity and see nothing but a box of broken toys, I refer you to the answer I gave earlier. Go and work in Tesco's. You're of no use. What you may be looking at is a group of people who are stronger and better than they have ever been. And no one knows why, but they need to be for those around them and for themselves, and they certainly are. This week, on Monday, I went for my consultation. I had my blood test. It was cross-matched. The result was 7.1. And a transfusion was arranged for Saturday, and we obviously needed a CT scan. We left it to Wednesday, and on Wednesday we chased the CT scan with the professor. We unfortunately found out at that point that the cross match that had taken place on Monday would have run out by Saturday. And for reasons that we don't know, because the trial sister, who has been exemplary through the 12 months of our time together, was off, so couldn't be questioned, but the transfusion actually hadn't been booked. So the trial sister, who's no longer working there, who's now on the general ward, she was straight on it. She organised another cross match for the Friday and made sure that 3 units of blood, not 2, because remember, it's another little thing. I am not receiving medical care. I'm receiving palliative care. So if you've got 2 and one's got a cherry on the top, I have the one with the cherry, because I can't have another one, because I won't be here. Friday I had the cross match. Saturday I went in for the transfusion, went into day case. I was with people I like, people I know, but unfortunately they could only give me 2 units because a consultant, who I wasn't aware of and didn't know, had changed Jenny's order from 3 units. He crossed it out and only put 2. Now it's a fact, the reasoning is unimportant, that there was no accompanying note with that, so that the consultant on call, who was haematology, couldn't make a decision because they didn't know why the 3 units had been cut down to 2, so they had to stand with the oncology specialist's decision, and they aren't available because they're not on call and it's a weekend and the phone's off. Now, that then leaves me feeling a little bit vulnerable, because I feel much better now standing in front of you. I couldn't have done this with a blood count of 7.1, but you know, I was quite happy with the 2 units. Then today, just before I come to give this talk, and as a fitting end to it, I meet a new friend. I go to Daycase to have a blood test this morning, minded that there is a unit of blood with my name on it that's effectively going to be wasted. And this person goes, I can sort that out. A brand new friend, a woman called Christine, who was a ward sister. And she filled the forms in, and this doesn't play well externally. She said, come on then, and marched me around to where the blood test is being taken place, and my little queuing thing, like you have when you're queuing for meat in Tesco's and all of the large supermarkets. It was past the number. Someone else was in there. So she went in and she went, hello John, lovely to see you. Hope you don't mind. Get out, because he's a priority. Right. And John's going, oh, OK. Out goes John and sits down. She says, I'm standing here because he needs doing. All right. And then did that. And I just instantly fell in love, because I got all these things planned that I wanted to say, but I'd met someone. But the woman, Christine, today, she went down to the lab. You will know what this will entail. I don't. As my final words are these. She went down to the lab and waited whilst they did the bloods. 15 minutes later, came back with the result. 15 minutes. And said, it's 8.9, you need 2 units. I'll have you in here tomorrow. I'll cannulate you before your scan, which is tomorrow at 9 o'clock. And if you have a word with her over there, she'll sort out your lunch today, because she's got a memory like a sieve. Oh, is that the time? I don't think you can get better customer service than that. I don't think you can have a better customer experience than that. It's a pity mine won't be overly long. But it's been lovely being with all of you today. Thank you very much for giving me your time. Thank you.